Graphic design? Can you make a living at that?
Three, two, one, fun, 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 fun.
Welcome to Design Futures, a show about what happens after design school. I'm Chris St. Cyr, and my guest on this episode is Sadie Kenyon. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. Sadie is a merchandise coordinator at Death Wish Coffee, where she is responsible for selecting merchandise that will resonate with the Death Wish Coffee customer. Previously, she has worked for Directive, a network security company, Lane Press, a commercial offset printer, and BestPass, a payment platform for toll management. She is a 2019 graduate of the College of St. Rose. So welcome.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm glad we could catch up. It hasn't been too long, 2019.
But it feels like forever still.
It seems like you've been doing a lot of stuff though. You're busy.
Yeah, I tell everyone I'm just really bad at being bored.
Oh, well, you gotta be bored. It takes time off though too.
Oh, you need the mental breaks here and there. I'm not the best at it.
Yeah, so you've had a few different positions and now you're at Death Wish Coffee. That was definitely something that piqued my interest when I saw that you were working there. Like something of your update popped up with Death Wish. I was like, oh, I have a subscription to Death Wish. I like that coffee. Let's see what's going on there. So how is it? What's it like at Death Wish Coffee? It seems like a fun place to work, according to all the LinkedIn posts that I see.
I mean, I'm obsessed with my job, although my title is not graphic designer anymore. I feel like in a creative process, I still just kind of took a sidestep. I still get to make a lot of really cool things, work with a lot of really interesting artists and designers and vendors. It's still a small enough company where it's like a tight-knit community, but we still are getting a lot of work done.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you were a graphic design student of mine at St. Rose, and you've had other design positions and titles. So can you explain a little bit more about what is a merchandise coordinator?
Yeah, so at this specific company, it's a very small team. It is me and then my boss, Kyle, who is the director of our lifestyle and marketing. Her and I work together and we brainstorm. We kind of just throw ideas out, anything that's not really coffee. So any kind of merchandise, any kind of mugs is our big one. We look at the next year planning and just try to source the best vendors or we've used freelancers or even our own internal designers, and just kind of come up with cool product we think our buyers, our customers might be interested in.
How do you decide? Coffee is, we need a vessel for coffee. So mugs are kind of the obvious choice, but how do you decide on other products? Like, do you do user research, customer research? You kind of know the lifestyle brand. I mean, Death Wish has a very clear brand. We'll take a look at some of the visuals later, but how do you make that decision?
It's a lot of trend research. It's a lot of studies looking into who is buying Death Wish coffee, what our actual buyers look like, what their lifestyle is, how they like to brew their coffee, what their methods are. And coming into this role, I didn't realize how much I had to consider those things, which once you think about making coffee, it makes sense, but there's so many different methods of brewing. And now I kind of get to have a hand in making a French press or a kettle, or just kind of even just our concepts or colorways for mugs too. We really get to dive in. And then when it comes down to like apparel and everything, it goes a lot with what's trending and what's trending in our age groups, and just kind of just further developing and researching that specific information to see what might be coming next. It's always a little bit of a gamble and a risk, but if you can do enough research and have a gut feeling.
What is the audience like for Death Wish? Like you talked about age group, is it younger, older? Is it...
Yeah. As the company grows, the range seems to also be growing. So our age range, we would say, is about 25 to 45, which varies quite a bit. And as the company becomes larger, it kind of skews outward. We do have our core groups, but we also have the outliers who pick it up at a grocery store or just wonder what it's like. So it is a constant state of developing who those people are. And I think as the company keeps growing, the more research we'll have to do to actually better understand that.
One of the, lifestyle connections that I noticed. I mean, I do like the coffee. Like Death Wish is not a sponsor of this podcast, just to make that clear. I have had a subscription to the company for a while, but then I noticed at some point there was this, like the Dropkick Murphys showed up in something that I saw. I was like, oh man, how cool is that? Because I spent a lot of time living in Boston and in the 90s and was very familiar with Dropkick Murphys. And they're one of my favorite bands. Oh man, that's like a perfect match, and I watched a couple of the videos where you, or the podcasts where you have one of the lead singer, Ken Casey, is talking about Boston, the band, and kind of all these other things.
Yeah.
And it just sort of fits, like this Irish punk rock band from Boston drinking this hard, really like intense coffee. And I imagine there's other kind of relationships like that kind of.
Oh yeah, for sure. And I mean, I think it's just so interesting too. It's like an Irish rock band. Like not everyone would go unless you know them. Like I've always been a big fan. It wouldn't be everyone's direct first thought, but it kind of was like a collaboration that just went hand in hand. It just worked.
Right.
And I actually, this past March, was at the show in Albany, and it was so funny because I'm looking around. I'm like, there are so many Death Wish shirts here right now. I was like, they're everywhere.
I was looking on the website earlier and looking at the staff, and you all have these quotes about coffee. So I'm gonna read yours and I want you to explain it a little bit more. So Sadie's quote is, "I'm not saying I'm a better person after coffee. I'm just saying I'm better at keeping my thoughts to myself."
It
So
goes hand in hand with not being a morning person. My whole job is to critique and judge. Would you rather that pre-coffee or post-coffee?
oh, well, yeah, I don't know. So you have to have coffee in order to tone it down, right? Is that what you're saying?
Depends on the day.
To be more level-headed. I guess that's probably true, for a lot of people. Yeah. So
Oh, I will say though, being level-headed, this is the hardest job I've ever had, having to like be stern with my vendors, getting merchandise or samples back and having to be like, look at someone and be like, this is not what you promised me. This is not what you said it'd be. You misprinted something.
yeah.
And handling that was the hardest switch over, because being on the design side initially, I was the one usually receiving the feedback only. So to switch and being the person giving it was a little hard for me.
Can you talk a little bit about like that part of the process? Like you have vendors, like how do you source kind of like, like t-shirts or mugs or whatever? Like what's that process like? Because that, again, that's very different, I imagine, than, a designer role. And did you do a little bit of that in your previous job?
Yeah, so actually at my role in Best Pass, that was my first job right out of college. And with that job, it was one of the best learning experiences I had. But working for a trucking company, being their only creative person, I took on a lot. I didn't want to say no, and I learned a lot while doing that. So I will never say I regretted that. But you do burn out. And one of my last projects with the company was I was doing all of their internal and external merchandise for employees or any customers or anything they want to take to trade shows, everything. And I actually worked with, it was taking up so much of my time on top of my design work that I worked with them to get a third party resource called Inkwell. We built a web store together. We ordered all of the products, and with supply chains, by the time we'd usually come, I had to go and change and pick some other ones. And even though that was more of a logo slap, I did get to design some shirts there. It was a really interesting switch up from doing campaigns or print or digital work. Instead, I was like making this product that I was watching the other employees get so excited to see. But it was an interesting process that really kind of drove me towards this role. As soon as I saw it open up, I was like, well, that's not what I do, but it's what I'm doing.
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what made me apply.
And so what is that like as far as the, the responsibility of working with vendors and working with the team? Like, can you talk about just, I don't know, like your everyday kind of interactions with different people and, what you're responsible for?
So to kind of kick off working there, my boss and I did just like a giant group brainstorm. My next step from there was taking what came from that brainstorm. And then my main job is from that point, pulling those ideas and then actually doing the research to find the vendors, emailing out, receiving the quotes back, requesting samples, and then I do the quality check of the samples too. So any kind of mug or cup that we're going to do, just test it out, see how it actually works in a dishwasher. Or even our shirts. There countless amount of times where my boss and I, like, we've taken them home and dried them ourselves to make sure they didn't shrink.
Yeah.
And then a lot of it is just trial and error. And what we do end up liking, I try to usually put 3 different options together. And then once a week, I will go in front of our product pricing meeting and present what I found.
So you're talking about it. Let's take a look at some of that. You mentioned the Father's Day is coming up. Of course, once this episode airs, it'll be long past Father's Day, but everybody call your dad. So you mentioned the gifts for dad is something you've worked on as in this new role. So what do we have here?
So we have what we're calling our classic collection. That is our main go-to for Death Wish. We have our zips, our logo hoodies, crew necks, that kind of stuff. And then the mason jars and the roadie tumbler were actually one of my first days there. I threw out the idea that we had no glassware. We didn't have an iced coffee vessel directly on our site, and it would probably be something to look into, especially considering we just had Blue and Berry launch, and we've been showing good recipes for our blueberry iced coffee. And so I, with that, reached out to a few different vendors, got prices for glassware, and then it's kind of like keeping up with a timeline. You follow up with your vendor, see where they're at in the process. After it's all signed off on your side, you get your pre-production samples. You critique whatever you need to on that, whether it's sizing, if it's off-centered or not, and then you go forward, and then we create for our website these PDPs, and that's how our customers buy them.
One thing I did want to ask you. So with my subscription, I get a sticker every time. So I have like 1,000 Death Wish stickers, but every once in a while I'll get like a patch or a pin. I think when I first signed up, there was a whole packet. It was really well kind of like organized. There's all this kind of like stuff in it. Of course there was a letter, but I think I don't know if it was in the original packet, but at one point I got a comic book. There's just been like this range of stuff. Do you work on that, or will you work on that as well? The stuff that's like associated with subscriptions?
I will be anything that's not coffee. So we order the stickers, the patches, the pins. So I will be on more of that soon.
So you're working with the design side to, like, you work with the designers to like, like here we're thinking about this product, and then does the design team then take that and kind of do a mock-up, see what the images will look like on the product, or what's that part like?
So a lot of times we work with the creative director or the team, and some of the times we have the full concept of what we want to do. By the time we bring it to them, we'll submit a request and fill in as much information as we can give our designers of the direction we want to go, as much inspiration, if we've done anything similar in the past that's worked, anything that will help them. And then we just work as a team to go through. They'll show us what they've created. We'll give feedback. They'll give feedback too if we throw an idea out there and they're like, hey, this would make a better poster than a shirt. Like, they let us know what they think too. And so definitely a team effort.
You say you have a supervisor.
Mhm.
Is it it's the two of you, right?
Yep.
In your kind of department. So what's your boss's title?
Her exact title, I'm going to mess up, but Kyle Rodriguez is the lifestyle and events coordinator.
And so is that like your path? Like, is that the next like step up for you? Or is there something, that's in between that? Or kind
I
of
don't know.
what's, yeah.
I'm kind of I love my job. I love where I'm at right now, but I'm
Yeah.
also young and open
Right.
to experiences. If it leads me somewhere else in a few years, it does. I feel like this is the time to explore all my roots now, or and see what I do and don't like.
Yeah, I
I
think that's a good attitude to have.
Yeah, I'll see where it leads me.
Can you talk about salary? Because this is different than a design position that you have. I mean, you're a few years out of school.
It's definitely higher than when I was a designer. And I think that with a position or a role like this, it is a little easier to track growth and
Mhm.
to track performance. And I think that was where I really struggled at my past job as a designer was they went through a lot of managers. There's a lot of
Mhm.
people, different people's opinions. There's a lot of different people viewing my work.
Right.
But it depended on the person if they thought it was good or not, or if they thought they liked it, if they had ways to change it to be better. Where I feel like in my role now, not having the direct designer title, there is an easier path to a promotion or a raise.
And you seem to indicate that's because it's like the design role has this kind of subjectivity attached
Yeah.
to it, where people have like opinions and not necessarily based on like, I don't know, hard numbers or anything. I mean, design is
I
often
think
looked
it's
at that way.
very subjective. Art in every form is
Yeah.
subjective. But like in my direct experience at my past position, I went from the graphic designer to I think they made my second title up. Then I became graphic designer too. But
Right. Sure.
I was the only one. So I don't know where one
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
um
So let's talk about the other, because you still do design a little
mhm,
bit. So I brought up your Instagram where you have a little bit of design work, and you have a website with some more student projects. But so
yeah.
you mentioned before, like this, I think it's this here, is this right? The
Yeah, that's Helderberg Mead Works and originally in Esperance. They now have a second location in Troy. I've done some smaller brochures for them. I've also worked on a few bottles. If you want to go to the next one,
yeah, this one
um,
here.
I worked with them on an experimental mead series, and it was a little different than their normal branding. They wanted something a little cleaner, a little more simple.
Mhm.
um, they were great to work with, gave really great feedback, were pretty clear, and I think we are now on our third bottle of this series.
They liked it. This came out perfect in every way. Wow, that's an endorsement. You need to put that on your website. I did want to show this other one because this is probably your best project ever. No, I'm just kidding. This is from my class from years ago.
This is
Uh,
from your class. This is also the project that like 2 weeks before it was due, my whole flash drive disappeared.
I did want to show this just because this is like an example of what I try to get students to do more of. Like just these simple symbols for the interface for your app design. It was more of a kind of an illustrated, kind of has a little bit of a texture, this kind of wavy line and kind of a loose kind of fill color, which I really appreciate. I appreciate it every time I see it in interface design, because like, web design or app design is very flat these days. And when it's appropriate, I think, we can design something a little different. So, but
Looking
as
back, I love to laugh at this one because this was probably one of my more illustrated and like sketchy projects. And of course, it was for a digital interface.
right, right, as opposed to like a poster or something print based where you could really explore that. So what was your experience like at St. Rose?
I had a great time, especially when it came down to my most memorable is my art classes, my design classes. I actually went into St. Rose as a studio major, and I wanted to do art education, and that program was cut.
Mhm.
And so I ended up the second half, I think officially the first half of sophomore year, switching to design. I think that was the best choice I've ever made. I
Yeah.
wasn't fully sure. Like I had done an internship as a web designer. I knew that I didn't want to just be a web designer, and I wasn't quite sure what other routes there was for me.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad that one, I stayed at St. Rose, and two, I chose the design program.
Where was your internship? What did you?
So I graduated high school early. I decided my family, coming from construction, needed a backup in case art didn't work out. So I went to BOCES and took welding. And my senior year, I graduated the actual high school early, but I still had to
Mhm.
complete the second part of my welding. So I wasn't going to sit in a school all day. So I started applying for internships, and I found Directive, where they offered me a web design internship for the
Okay.
afternoons. And so I would go and weld in the mornings until 11:30, run home, shower, change, and then go and work until 5:30 as a web designer.
Can you still weld? Can you still pick up the tools and like, if you need
Oh
to
yeah.
fix something around the house, you could get out
Oh
the
yeah.
welding tools? Yeah.
I still love it. Like I still love bringing welding into my studio work. I still try to do sculpture as much as
Mhm.
possible. I don't have as much time anymore.
Yeah.
My dad is really setting himself up for retirement. He's building his own little forge at our house.
Oh,
So
nice.
anytime I really want to go work on a big project, I can drive out to my parents.
Yeah. So did you kick ass in the sculpture classes at St. Rose? Did you go in there and do welding and everybody was like, what?
I welded my chair project, but with design being so credit heavy, I never actually took a sculpture class there.
So at St. Rose, did you do any extra curricular activities? I don't know, clubs, sports, going any of those faculty trips or anything like that that kind of got you outside of the classroom?
I wish, that's my one regret. I wish I did more of that. I was very work heavy.
Mhm.
I at all times was working 2 to 3 jobs, sometimes four. Worked at the mall. I worked at restaurants, just kind of
Yeah,
anywhere I could make a buck and
making it
hustle a
work.
little.
That's a word that I would apply to you that I remember about you is hustle. Like I got the sense there was a hustle energy about you all the time. And maybe that was positive and negative at times. Like, where's your project? Where's the rest of it? You seem to be always busy. You're always like doing something, right? So that's good.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. I always joke. I never took a break after college. I don't think I can't ever picture myself taking one.
You
So
got to take vacation. Have you taken vacation since you've been out?
the small ones here and
Yeah.
there, just a few trips.
Got,
I'm at the point though where I know this isn't the way to think, but for me to go take a trip, the amount of work to come back to almost isn't worth it sometimes.
no, somebody else can do it for you. That's what they're supposed. That's the team. It's a collaboration, right? They can pick up the slack. You gotta have a break. It's let your
I'm
mind
trying to
rest.
get better at that.
Yeah, you got to do that. Thinking about where you are now, which is very different, but you've had other design jobs, and maybe what you're doing now connects. But can you connect your education at St. Rose to kind of what you've been doing in the field?
Oh, I think my entire education influences everything I do daily. Even when it comes down to my boss's favorite story is the reason I got hired was, and I didn't think this interview went well. It was the most intense one I've ever had, but she laid down a shirt in front of me and was like, "Tell me what's wrong with this." And I'm like, "Okay, designer brain, please do this, do the thing." And I ended up catching that there was a gapping in a pattern, and the look on her face was, I was like, "Oh, is there not? Was I wrong?" And I guess that I caught something that she didn't initially catch, and I think that is a big reason I have my job I do today. And I think if it wasn't for St. Rose teaching us to be so detail oriented,
Mhm.
that I wouldn't notice things like that now that really
Right.
bother me, but I do notice them.
Right. Oh yeah, that's like the curse, one of the curses of being a designer, right? You exist in the world, there's design all around and you can't turn it off, right? Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Yeah, so you saw something on the apparel. Yeah, I think, like that. I think that's a good thing to think about, to acknowledge, is, in a decent design program where you leave that program and you're thinking about the details of, whatever the design is that you're working on, right?
Think too is being able to notice those things is what can help you grow too. I feel like coming out of St. Rose, I looking back at my college work, I was not anywhere close to my best. I don't even think I'm at my best now. I'll always be growing, but when you know what to look for as your work grows, you only start picking up more things to pick out, and
Yeah.
that's what helps develop, and that's when the growth really starts.
So that's the thing that connects with your education. Are there things that you think about now where you think maybe design education needs to change, needs to kind of think about some new things?
Yeah, I'm very grateful for you because I was going to do a book for my senior showpiece, and you're like, do digital. Just
Oh,
do digital.
I do have that rant.
And I was like, you know what? I'm going to. And I'm so grateful I did. In all of the interviews I do, my Irish folklore has always been a talking piece. I think I wish that our program had a little heavier of a digital focus.
Mhm.
Everything now is so digital. I mean, even just basic marketing, you kind of have to know how to create email campaigns and design a template. And although I would never change my time at St. Rose, I do wish that we had more of that.
Yeah. How did you choose St. Rose as a school to go to? You're from upstate New York, is that right? Somewhere up here?
Yeah, I'm from a little town outside of Oneonta, and
Okay.
St. Rose in Albany was not my first choice, but financially it made the most sense,
Mhm.
especially the route I was going, our education. There was a few other options, but I couldn't dig myself into over
Sure.
$200,000 of college debt to start out. And so not I really got lucky. I don't know how I ended up at St. Rose in the design program, but it happened.
It did happen.
Rose's location for someone like me from a really small town, any kind of city was really intimidating. Like
Right.
to me, Albany was the city that
Yeah.
was a big city. I hadn't been to New York City until I started school and went on a bus trip, and that was my first time going there. So Albany was a little overwhelming.
Was
So
it? Yeah.
it was small enough to adjust and feel comfortable, but at first I was like, this is the biggest change I've ever had. I think
Yeah.
you wrote on my junior review a note that said, get out of Dodge. I still have it somewhere.
Yeah. I mean, because I understand that. I think maybe the town I grew up in Maine is probably not as small as where you grew up, but it's similar. I mean, I appreciate for the most part, the kind of student that would go to the St. Rose program, smaller town,
Yeah.
maybe not that uh, diverse a place, not as much like sort of culture, arts, things like that. So that, that was I need to get out of my own Dodge. So, and to me, I think it benefited me. I was like, I got to get to someplace bigger than this. It's got to be more going on in the world than my little town I grew up in, so.
And that was 100% how I felt. Like I was forever grateful for St. Rose for that reason, because my senior year, when I graduated early, I was also their only art student doing it on my own. And I would just bring artwork in. And I think that sometimes those little towns kind of forget how important things like design are. And if
Right.
I had the greatest high school art teacher who really pushed me, and she like laid colleges out, was like, these are some local ones, these are some farther ones, and showed me. And it's people like that that really push. Otherwise I probably wouldn't have gone to design school. I probably would have been welding somewhere right now,
Yeah.
like making more money, but not as
Yeah. I mean,
happy.
you make more money being a welder than designer or design educator. I'm sure of it. Yeah. Yeah. You got to do what you like too, though. Like, I mean, I think, you can find ways like you talked about, like you can use welding or use
Yeah.
other skills, other knowledge in the creative fields too, right? It doesn't have to be, it's, people think of certainly design, it's like, it's all about the computer. It's like, yeah, it's going to end up on the computer at some point, but it doesn't have to be all about that, right? You could make a little sculpture and photograph it, bring it in the computer, right? Like there's lots of ways you could do that. So, wherever the students come from, they could, bring that
Yeah,
experience into design. And so that's interesting. So you took art classes in high school? You're talking about your art teacher. Did you have
I took all of my art classes
all of them?
by sophomore year. So we just started
Wow.
making them up at that
Oh
point.
yeah.
I think, I'm not totally sure. I think they have more classes now than when I was there.
Yeah.
But like I graduated with 30 kids and I was the only art student.
Right. Right. 30. You only had 30 in your graduating class?
I was class president.
That was definitely small. I've heard of smaller though. Yeah. So you talked about like your family business with welding, and you did that kind of thing. Did you do other kind of creative or art making things as a kid, before high school, before like official classes or anything?
I always loved art. No
Oh.
one in my life was surprised when I announced that I was going to school for it. Like I was always coloring or drawing or painting or spray painting. Something I shouldn't have been. Like it just depended on the age and how angsty I was.
Right.
So I don't think anyone was surprised, but I had the same teacher who was my preschool or kindergarten art teacher kind of moved up with me. So she
Mhm.
was there when I graduated too. And she really helped. She took the time to notice that I was interested. And when I came in with a sketchbook, really excited, she took the time to like look that over with me. And I think that's really, in a community that doesn't think art first, I think that was like the handheld I needed to
Yeah.
get to where I'm at now.
A lot of times it only takes one person, right? Just that one person to inspire you or to show you that this is possible. You can have a life of, being a designer, artist, or, something creative. So that's nice. That's great. So we got to have those art teachers in our lives, whether they're like official art teachers or, somebody on the side. So one of the other things that I've talked to a few people about is just kind of what they're doing outside of work, to create balance in their life. You said you don't take breaks, but that's not entirely true because you have a lot of dogs. So you must take some breaks and spend time with all your dogs. Was it on Instagram? It says dog mom. So you have 5 dogs. Have you always had a lot of dogs in your life?
I've always had a lot of dogs. We have a farm too,
Okay.
so that makes it easier to
You
I'm not
yourself or your parents?
my fiance and I do. We have a
Mhm.
farm. So I'm not just hoarding these dogs in an apartment, I promise. We have acreage.
Oh,
They
that's
run
good.
around.
Yeah. So what are the dogs' names?
We have Diesel, Scout, Bonnie, Josie, and Winston.
And what kind of dogs are they?
4 of them. So Josie, mine is a beagle, Scout's a beagle, and
Uh,
then we have 2 hound mixes, and
yeah.
then Winston, who is the baby, is a rescue. They told me he was a beagle lab, and they
Yeah.
just lied.
Yeah.
He's a little bit of everything.
Liver. So that's something you do for enjoyment, right? You get
Yeah.
to you hang out with your pets. And do you have other pets? You have a farm.
Um.
What else do you have on
Yeah.
the
So on
farm?
the farm we raise cows. We
Mhm.
have about 35 of them right now.
Wow.
When we recently moved out towards Glenville, we downsized our farm quite a bit. So we used to have like 200 chickens, which is too many chickens if you're wondering. We had goats and stuff, and now we're just trying to. We used to do like a farm stand and sell outwardly, and now we're just trying to kind of be self-sustained with food and grow
Yeah.
whatever is our own. And if there's leftover, then maybe go to a local market or something.
And you have a garden with vegetables and all that,
Oh yeah.
herbs, and yeah. So you're out there digging in the dirt. That's like relieving some of your stress, like
I think
pulling
that's my
weeds.
balance.
Yeah. Gotta have some fresh air, get your hands dirty,
I
right?
couldn't get too far out of the country. Like I'm still like 20 minutes from Albany, but
Yeah. Okay, it's time for the pop quiz part of the the show. All right, first question: caffeinated or decaffeinated?
Caffeinated.
What kind of question is that? Some of these might seem obvious since you work for Death Wish. So work beverage.
Iced coffee.
All right, after work beverage.
Depends, weeknight or weeknight or weekend. It's either
Friday night.
Friday night.
It's after work, but
I've
it's the
been
weekend.
on a seltzer kick, but I also have been enjoying wine lately. So
Bourbon, rye, or scotch?
bourbon.
You don't have to answer it, but it might be too personal. How many tattoos do you have?
Can I count them as one at this point? We're working on becoming one.
Coming on.
I
A lot.
I couldn't tell you a lot.
As a side conversation, is it a requirement to have tattoos to work at Death Wish? It seems like a requirement. All the photos I've seen, everybody has tattoos.
It might have helped me a little bit considering we have a tattoo series right now. It is the one job where I put on like a little blazer and it was short on the arms. I was like, you know what? I think that's okay. This
Yeah.
is fine. But we do have a handful of employees that have none. So
They probably feel pressure.
once you start, it doesn't stop. So
I have heard that. I have definitely heard that about people who are into it. Okay, sketchbook, blank or gridded?
oh, gridded
Type or image?
type.
Music you listen to while you're working?
Oh, that is always changing. That depends on the mood in the project.
Dropkick Murphys.
Dropkick Murphys. It depends. If I'm in that mood, Dropkick Murphys, but sometimes lately it's been Mac Miller. So
A range.
oh yes.
Okay, considering the dogs in your life, what are the sleeping arrangements? Crate or your bed?
Oh, my bed.
It's gonna
Some
be a
of,
big bed.
not all of them. Most of them like to sleep on the floor, but
Oh.
like I'm not opposed.
You're
I
not
paid the
opposed.
chiropractor a lot of money.
Oh, nice. Okay, last question in the pop quiz. If you weren't a designer slash merchandise coordinator, what would you be?
Tattoo artist.
Oh, wow, you were quick with that one.
That was what I was going to skip college and go for. My mom said, maybe not.
Maybe not.
No, if all else fails, I could still be an option. I haven't drawn or illustrated in a long time, so maybe not, but
You could be that tattoo artist that specializes in non-illustration. It's like all type or something that, you know.
the most graphic tattoos ever.
Yes, very simple lines and very graphic, not illustrated at all. Yeah. All right. What are your final thoughts for the young designers out there, current students that are going to listen to this once I tell them to go listen to it?
I think don't ever stop looking to learn and don't ever stop looking to grow. Even though me taking a career path that's not a designer, I opened a bunch of opportunities that I wouldn't have ever thought led myself to out of college. If you asked me when I graduated, I would tell you that I would have never taken a title that wasn't being a designer.
Yeah, I think that's excellent. That's kind of thing that I'm always curious to hear from former design students of, you know, design is really big. It's there's a lot to do in it, and it can lead to lots of different paths, right? And you are on a slightly different path than the traditional graphic design, right?
You can give them the Chris St. Cyr line that I screenshotted on my birthday of 2021.
What was that?
Says, oh no, this is on my 2-year. You congratulated me. And then you said, sounds good. And then left some space and said, one of the reasons to move on is when you stop learning. Chris
There
St.
you
Cyr.
go. Absolutely. Okay, I'm done. I can't learn anymore. Move on. Time to go be a tattoo artist. Well, it was great to catch up. It was certainly good to hear your story and your different kind of story. Good luck with all the farming.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on. I enjoyed this.
Yeah, it was fun. It was great to catch up.
Yeah, talk soon.
All right, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
It is the synergistic effects produced by holes.
So what do we learn from Sadie? Stay busy. The more you take on, the more you know what you can accomplish. And on a similar note, always be growing. Thanks to Sadie Kenyon of Death Wish Coffee. If you have any comments or questions for me or any of the guests, please leave them in the comments. And subscribe so you can catch the next episode of Design Futures. Until next time, go learn something. Your future depends on it. Thanks for listening. See ya.
Produced by Holy Effect.
Wipe those tears from your eyes.